before the world was filled with noise and rushing thought, there was a quiet place along the coast of northern Greece. The air smelled faintly of salt, olive trees swayed softly in the wind, and a young boy named Aristotle was growing up beneath the endless blue sky of a city called Stagira. He was born in 384 BC, long before our calendars or clocks, in a world that still believed the stars were gods, and the earth was the center of everything. His father, Nicomachus, was a physician to the royal court of Macedon, which meant that from a young age, Aristotle was surrounded by the world of medicine, anatomy, and careful observation. It's easy to imagine him as a child sitting quietly in his father's study, watching the flicker of lamplight across scrolls and tools, listening to quiet talk about the workings of the body. That early exposure to curiosity, to the idea that nature could be studied, planted something deep in him. When Aristotle was still young, tragedy touched his life. His parents passed away, and he was sent to live under the care of a guardian. He could have turned bitter or lost interest in the world, but instead, his curiosity deepened. At 17, he made a long journey south to Athens, the shining center of Greek culture, to study at the Academy of Plato. Imagine that moment, the dusty road winding down toward a city of marble columns, olive groves, and voices echoing in open courtyards. The Academy was no ordinary school. It was a place where the greatest minds debated the mysteries of reality, what exists, why it exists, and how we can know anything at all. Aristotle studied under Plato for nearly 20 years, 20 years of walking the same shaded paths, asking questions about everything from ethics to the stars. But Aristotle was not a man content to simply agree. While he admired Plato deeply, he began to feel that some of his teacher's ideas floated too high above the ground. Plato believed that the real world was just a shadow, that true reality existed in perfect, invisible forms, a form of beauty, a form of justice, a form of goodness, pure and untouched by the messy imperfections of life. Aristotle disagreed. He thought truth lived not in a separate realm, but here, in the real world, in the bark of trees, the hum of bees, the laughter of people walking by. He wanted to study what is, not just what might be. Over time, Aristotle's thinking began to branch in all directions. He studied biology, observing animals with careful precision. He studied physics, wondering how motion worked and why things fell. He wrote about art, logic, government, and the human soul. His mind became like a vast web of thought, all connected by one quiet belief, that knowledge comes from observation, and that the world itself is a teacher if you're patient enough to listen. When Plato died, Aristotle left Athens. The city was changing, and his views were sometimes unwelcome. He traveled across the Greek world, from islands to royal courts, until he was invited to tutor a young prince, a boy named Alexander. Yes, that Alexander, the one who would later become Alexander the Great. It's almost poetic to imagine the philosopher and the future conqueror sitting together in a sunlit garden, Aristotle teaching him not just about power, but about ethics, reasoning, and restraint. Perhaps he told him that true strength comes from understanding, not domination. For years, Aristotle stayed with Alexander's family in Macedon, continuing to write and study. He gathered notes, dissected animals, observed plants, and recorded the differences between creatures with almost obsessive care. To him, everything in nature had purpose and order. He saw the world as a grand living system, full of patterns waiting to be understood. His method was simple but revolutionary. Watch closely, ask questions, and draw conclusions from what you see, not from what you wish were true. Eventually, Aristotle returned to Athens and founded his own school, the Lyceum. It wasn't grand or formal like Plato's Academy. It was more like a place of wandering thought, Students walked with Aristotle through covered pathways as he lectured, observing the world around them. This gave rise to the term peripatetic, meaning those who walk about. His school became a living library of ideas, where students collected plant samples, observed the stars, and discussed everything from poetry to politics. Aristotle himself wrote hundreds of works, though only a fraction survive today. Even so, the ones that remain shaped Western thought for over 2,000 years. He wrote the Nicomachean Ethics, exploring what it means to live a good life. He believed that happiness wasn't just pleasure or comfort, but eudaimonia, a deep sense of fulfillment that comes from living with virtue and purpose. He argued that balance was the key to everything. Courage is good, but too much becomes recklessness. Generosity is good, but too much becomes wastefulness. In this way, Aristotle's philosophy feels almost timeless. It speaks to the quiet truth that moderation and awareness make life meaningful. He also developed logic, the rules of reasoning, turning thought into a kind of language that could be tested and repeated. His organon became the foundation of rational thinking, influencing scholars for centuries. Even today, when we use phrases like, if this, then that, or when we look for evidence before forming a belief, we're echoing the methods Aristotle helped shape. But Aristotle wasn't perfect. He made mistakes, like anyone. Some of his scientific ideas were later proven wrong, such as his belief that heavier objects fall faster than lighter ones. But even in his errors, there was progress, because he showed that knowledge wasn't static. It grew, changed, and improved through observation and questioning. So, as you drift off tonight, imagine that quiet world, the hum of cicadas in the trees, the soft footsteps on ancient stone, and the voice of a teacher explaining the mysteries of existence beneath a Grecian sky.